All right, let's dive in. Today, we're exploring the life of Fabrice Duverger.
Yeah, his story is really something.
It's pretty fascinating. We've got some excerpts from his autobiography, Qui est innocent? Société, souffrance et quête de sens.
Oh, and that other piece, Who is Innocent? Intimacy of Atypical Myopathy.
Exactly. And it's not just typical, oh, woe is me, I'm sick story.
No, not at all.
It's way deeper than that. He critiques society, talks about suffering, and even delves into how things like food and environmental toxins affect us.
He ties it all together so well. His personal experiences with these big questions about society and philosophy makes you really think.
For sure. Like, are we really aware of the systems we live in and how they affect our well-being?
Right, exactly.
So, okay, let's start at the beginning. Duverger's childhood, he describes it as rough, dealing with family conflicts and feeling isolated.
Yeah, tough start.
But here's the thing, he also excels in athletics, shows incredible strength and endurance, even as a kid.
Yeah, he talks about this almost uncanny ability to lift and carry heavy things way beyond what anyone expected. It makes his later health decline even more striking.
That contrast is wild, right?
Absolutely.
And then, boom, his health just crashes. Sudden and inexplicable.
Like, what happened?
Totally. And then he's on this frustrating medical odyssey, going from doctor to doctor.
Countless tests, biopsies, MRIs, you name it. But no clear diagnosis. Imagine the emotional toll of that, the uncertainty.
Must have been incredibly difficult.
It really is during this time, searching for answers, that his critique of modern society starts to form.
Yeah, he sees the system as prioritizing profit over well-being, pushing pharmaceuticals and processed foods, the whole nine yards. He even uses the word matrix to describe it.
That's such a powerful image, the matrix. It's like this feeling of being trapped, a system that's controlling and manipulating you, leading towards self-destruction.
Bleak, right. And he really seems to hone in on vaccines, industrial food, and environmental factors as potentially playing a role in his health problems. So he's asking us to examine our own relationship with these things.
He really is. And his skepticism towards conventional medicine becomes a defining moment. It pushes him towards this path of self-experimentation. He's like his own guinea pig, meticulously documenting his diet and how it affects his symptoms.
He's like, okay, I'm going to figure this out myself.
Exactly.
And he gets super specific. Gluten, certain additives, even the maltodextrin in candy, he sees them as potential triggers. It's like a detective story within his own body.
It really is. And while his approach might lack scientific rigor, his observations are fascinating. They offer a glimpse into that connection between food, environmental toxins, and the body's immune response.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, are there things in our own diets we should be paying closer attention to?
Right. Are we missing subtle ways our bodies react to what we eat?
Totally. And it's not just about food. He also digs into his personal relationships, looking for answers there, too. He goes through a series of romantic relationships, each one teaching him something new about connection and his own emotions.
That's so interesting how he connects those two things.
It's like he's trying to figure out the whole puzzle, you know? But his online friendship with Jackin, that really stands out.
It does. That intellectual companionship, that genuine support, it's crucial when facing personal challenges.
And as his myopathy progresses, he has to rely more and more on aids for mobility, first a cane, then a wheelchair.
Right. And it's at this point he starts reflecting on the social stigma surrounding disabilities, especially those that aren't immediately obvious.
Those invisible disabilities, right?
Yeah, it's like this hidden struggle.
Exactly. So he might look normal, but underneath, he's dealing with this condition that affects every aspect of his life.
And he talks about how frustrating it is to be perceived as lazy or unmotivated, when in reality he's just exhausted from trying to function.
It must be incredibly isolating to have people misinterpret your struggles like that.
It is. He talks about feeling trapped in a body that's failing him while also feeling completely misunderstood.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking when he shares that story about falling while walking with a friend. The friend, not knowing about his myopathy, just laughed it off as clumsiness.
Oof. Imagine how that must have felt.
It really highlights that disconnect between his reality and how others perceive him.
Such a poignant example of how invisible disabilities are often missed or misunderstood.
It makes you think we should all try to be more aware, right?
Absolutely. We need to look beyond surface and recognize that disability can take many forms, some we might not even see.
And Duverger doesn't just point this out, he becomes an advocate for change. He challenges that narrow way society defines disability, pushing for a more inclusive perspective.
It's not just about physical limitations, it's so much more than that.
And it's personal, too. He talks about the challenges in relationships, the fear of being judged, the difficulty of explaining his limitations to others.
It's another layer of complexity to his story, the emotional toll of living with an invisible disability.
Heavy stuff. But what's amazing is that through it all, Duverger's story isn't a tragedy. He's always searching for meaning and purpose, finding solace in writing and photography.
It's inspiring, right?
Totally. He finds peace in accepting his limitations, embracing the present moment. He doesn't let his myopathy define him. He's actively choosing to live as fully as he can.
It really makes you question how we approach our own challenges. Can we find meaning and purpose in the face of adversity?
That's a question worth pondering for sure. And speaking of questions, this is where Duverger's exploration of those unconventional theories about food and environmental toxins really takes center stage. It's like he's not just observing anymore, he's starting to develop his own theories.
Yeah, it's a fascinating turn in his story. He dives into gluten sensitivity, the impact of food additives, even the role of vaccines and heavy metals.
Pretty controversial stuff. We'll definitely unpack it more in the next part of our deep dive.
Looking forward to that.
But for now, I think it's safe to say that Fabrice Duverger's story is giving us a lot to think about.
It really is. From his childhood to his athletic achievements, his medical journey, his social critiques, it's all so thought-provoking.
He's really asking us to question our assumptions and see the world in a new light.
He is, and we've only just scratched the surface. All right, so we're back and ready to dig into those unconventional theories of Duverger's, about food and environmental toxins and how they might be impacting his health.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting. Remember how he was meticulously documenting everything, like what he ate and how it affected his symptoms?
Right, like a human lab bat almost.
Exactly, and he started to notice that certain foods and environmental factors were making his myopathy worse. He even went as far as cutting out entire food groups, like meat.
Wow, that's commitment.
It is. And gluten, oh man, gluten became his biggest focus.
Gluten, huh?
Yeah, the protein found in wheat and a bunch of other grains, he became convinced it was a major culprit in his health struggles.
Like public enemy number one.
Pretty much. He went all in on this, like a personal science experiment. Reading every ingredient label, avoiding anything with even a trace of gluten.
Sounds intense.
It was. He even found hidden gluten in the craziest places, like processed meats and candy.
Sneaky gluten.
Right, it's everywhere. But here's the thing. After cutting out gluten, he noticed some serious improvements in his overall well-being.
Interesting. So that makes you wonder, could he be onto something?
It's a good question. I mean, his self-experimentation wasn't exactly a controlled scientific study.
Of course.
But his observations are super detailed, and they do make you think about that connection between what we eat and how we feel.
It's like maybe we should be paying more attention to how our bodies react to different foods.
Right. What works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly.
Duverger even suggested that maybe a lot of people have gluten sensitivities without even realizing it. He saw those around him with digestive issues like acid reflux and linked it back to all the gluten in our modern diet.
Makes you think, doesn't it?
It does, and his quest didn't stop there. He looked into other potential culprits too, like food additives, industrial farming practices, even the aluminum hydroxide used in vaccines.
Hold on, the what in vaccines?
Aluminum hydroxide, it's added to boost the immune response, make the vaccine more effective.
Oh, right, got it.
But with these additional areas, his theories definitely move into more controversial territory.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of debate around the long-term effects of some additives and the aluminum in vaccines.
Right, and Duverger was convinced they played a big role in his myopathy, but it's important to note that's not the general consensus in the medical community.
Definitely something to keep in mind. We're sharing Duverger's perspective here, but we're not necessarily endorsing it.
Exactly. It's crucial for listeners to understand that. They need to evaluate the evidence and make their own conclusions.
Absolutely. We're just presenting a balanced view, highlighting both the intriguing aspects and the potential limitations of his theories.
Well said. And his exploration of environmental toxins went beyond food and vaccines. He was really concerned about electromagnetic pollution, too. He believed it was contributing to his health problems.
Electromagnetic pollution, like from what?
All sorts of things. Fluorescent lights, electronic devices, Wi-Fi, you name it. He described experiencing some pretty intense symptoms after being exposed to these electromagnetic fields. Migraines, skin problems, cognitive issues, the whole works.
Wow, that sounds rough.
It was. He went to great lengths to minimize his exposure, avoiding certain types of lighting, being super careful with technology.
That's fascinating. This sensitivity to electromagnetic fields, what they call electromagnetic hypersensitivity, or EHS, it's a bit of a mystery.
It is. Some people report real debilitating symptoms, but the scientific evidence to back it up as a distinct medical condition, well, it's limited.
So it's another example of Duverger challenging conventional wisdom, even when his experiences aren't fully understood by mainstream science.
Exactly. It all boils down to his relentless pursuit of answers. He wasn't satisfied with just accepting the limitations of a diagnosis. He had to understand the root causes of his suffering, even if the explanations seemed a little out there.
And this led him to chelation therapy, right?
Yep. Chelation therapy, it's a treatment designed to remove heavy metals from the body.
Okay, so why chelation therapy?
Well, he became convinced that the buildup of heavy metals, maybe from vaccines or environmental pollution, was contributing to his myopathy. And he saw chelation therapy as a potential solution. He even started talking to doctors who specialized in it.
Interesting. But it's important to remember that chelation therapy is a serious medical procedure. It's not something to try on your own.
Absolutely, it should only be done under the care of a qualified doctor. And not all medical professionals were on board with Duverger's ideas. Some were skeptical of his theories and hesitant to recommend chelation therapy.
It's understandable. It can be tricky when someone's pursuing unconventional treatments. They often face resistance from a medical system that's more focused on mainstream approaches.
Yeah, it became another hurdle in his search for answers. He was up against the limitations of the medical establishment and the frustration of not being able to access the treatments he thought could help him.
But even with these setbacks, he didn't give up, did he?
Nope, not Duverger. He was determined to explore every avenue, even if it meant challenging the status quo and looking beyond conventional medicine.
He had this unwavering belief in the power of alternative therapies. It's both fascinating and thought-provoking.
It makes you think about the power we have over our own health and the potential for unconventional approaches to provide relief when traditional methods fail.
It's a testament to human resilience, that's for sure. Always searching for a better tomorrow, even when things are tough.
And it's a reminder that we're always learning, that the pursuit of knowledge can be empowering. But before we wrap up this deep dive, we need to shift gears a bit. Let's talk about Duverger's reflections on the social and emotional challenges of living with an invisible disability.
Yeah, that's another crucial aspect of his story. It forces us to confront our own biases and assumptions about what it means to live with a condition that others can't see.
Welcome back to our deep dive on Fabrice Duverger. We've covered a lot of ground, from his athletic days to his myopathy, his critique of society, even those unconventional theories.
Yeah, quite a journey.
Now we get to a really powerful part, his perspective on living with an invisible disability.
This is where he challenges us to rethink our whole understanding of what disability means. You know, those struggles that aren't always visible.
He makes it so clear that appearances can be deceiving. On the outside, he might seem normal, but underneath, he's dealing with this condition that impacts everything.
He talks about how frustrating it is to be seen as lazy or unmotivated, when in reality he's just exhausted from trying to function.
You can imagine the pull that takes, right?
Absolutely. It leads to this profound sense of isolation. He feels trapped in a body that's failing him, while also feeling completely misunderstood by those who don't get it.
It's like he's carrying this invisible burden. He even tells a story about stumbling while walking with a friend. The friend, not knowing about his myopathy, just laughed it off as clumsiness.
It must have been a stark reminder of that disconnect between his reality and how others perceive him.
Talk about a gut punch. It really underscores the need for empathy and awareness.
Absolutely. We need to look beyond surface appearances, recognize that disability takes many forms, some we might not even notice.
And Duverger takes it a step further. He criticizes how society defines disabilities so narrowly, primarily focusing on physical limitations.
It's like we have this checklist in our minds.
Right, and he argues that this limited view ignores the vast range of challenges people face with invisible conditions. He even points out the irony of some disability campaigns that rely so heavily on images of people in wheelchairs.
Perpetuating that stereotype.
Exactly. He feels it reinforces the idea that disability is all about physical mobility.
And ends up excluding so many people.
Exactly. He becomes a passionate advocate for broadening our understanding, urging us to recognize those unique struggles.
It's a powerful call for inclusivity, for a more nuanced view of human experience. It's a reminder to examine our own biases and create a more welcoming environment for everyone, no matter their abilities.
And he doesn't stop there. He delves into the deeply personal emotional impact of living with an invisible condition. The challenges of maintaining relationships, the fear of judgment, explaining limitations to others.
It adds another layer of complexity to his story.
He talks about the apprehension of telling potential partners about his condition, the balancing act of needing support while wanting to be independent. It's a lot to navigate.
It really is. And the impact on his family, particularly his parents, is really touching. They struggle to come to terms with his declining health and his unconventional theories.
It's a reminder that disability doesn't just affect the individual, but those around them as well.
For sure.
But even with all these challenges, Duverger's story is ultimately about resilience and hope. He refuses to be defined by his myopathy.
He finds meaning and purpose in creative outlets like writing and photography.
And he talks about finding peace and accepting his limitations, embracing the present moment. It's a powerful testament to the human spirit.
He shifts his focus from battling his condition to living as fully as possible within those constraints.
It's inspiring, isn't it, to see that kind of strength in the face of adversity?
It really is. Duverger's story challenges us to look beyond those superficial judgments, to see the strength and resilience in others, even when it's not obvious.
So well said. Fabrice Duverger's story might not offer easy answers, but it pushes us to ask better questions.
To approach the world with more compassion and awareness, to recognize the strength and vulnerability and authenticity.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it thought-provoking.
And that Duverger's story inspires you to keep exploring, questioning, and deepening your understanding of yourself and the world around you.